Hello and welcome to Colred Plays Raid Shadow Legends. I am Colred. Thank you for joining me for this edition of Raid Madness. Here with my special guest, JGigs. We are looking at the Southwest region, which is the Spider's Den. Now, just as a quick recap, I want to go over the way these champions were seeded. All of these ratings came from the public votes that you as players put into the game when you rated these champions. We compiled those ratings and then we tweaked them a little bit to kind of clear up some gaps. So that is the way that these were basically laid down. Now let's actually get into the analysis with JGigs. Jay, let's look at the first matchup here, Detha versus Mordecai. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's an interesting one because early in an account, Mordecai is huge. And he solves Spider for you. He's good in waves and other dungeons. He can be a pretty impactful champ to get. He's part of a promo code, if I'm not mistaken. Detha, on the other hand, I think Detha's dope, but she seems to require some other things to really shine. Am I wrong about that?
If you're going for a Detha unkillable comp, you need at least two other champions to make it work.
Yeah, so, and beyond that, she's good, but I don't know that she's amazing anywhere. Maybe she does some stuff that I'm not familiar with, but I don't know. This could be an upset, in my opinion. I think if we're going from a free-to-play standpoint, what I would rather have in my account, unless I've already got, what is it, like Fushan and Eris, I think I'd probably just take Mordecai and have Spider pretty much sorted, as well as Waves and Nether Spider potentially. And I don't know.
Do you think Detha is overrated by the public then? Because this is, based on at least the in-game public opinion. Now, we remember that that doesn't include all the areas of the game. There's no rating for Doom Tower bosses, for instance, in the in-game rating system. So Mordecai could potentially be valuable in more places where he's not really considered in the ratings. And Detha, for most people, I think, is that clan boss specialist. But do you think maybe we're weighing clan boss as too important? Is that what's going on? Or do you just think she's too hard to access in the early game, and therefore maybe we want to go with another champion?
I think being a Void Lego does her some, or I'm sorry, a Void Epic does her some favors here as far as making her harder to get, and she's part of something so powerful that it makes it seem like she's a huge deal. But by herself, I just don't think she is. I think Mordecai might be the more impactful champ here for most people.
Well, you are the expert, and if you say she's overrated, then maybe she's overrated. All right, well,
starting off with a bang, baby.
Starting off with a bang, absolutely. Okay, let's go ahead and drop down to the 2 versus 15 matchup. Now we've got another support here, another great support, Rectordrath, who is going up against Hatu from the Barbarian faction.
Yeah, I think this one's pretty clear cut. I think Rectordrath takes this one handily. I'm not sure Hatu stands a chance here.
What do you think the primary benefit of Rectordrath is? Especially if you pulled her from, as a free-to-play player, where would you use her? Where's the first place you would start to use her?
She's great in Arena, but I think you can plug her into most teams as you're progressing, and she's going to make a difference in your ability to climb. I think she's one of those champs that can kind of go everywhere. She's a good force reviver. She's got a lot going on. Hatu has some stuns. He's fine, but he's out of his league matched up against Rectordrath. He belongs. He's in a different conversation, I think.
Yeah. I do think that, one of the differences between champions that we're going to see probably all day long as we examine these matchups is that some champions are just universally applicable. You can put them into almost any team in any content. They're going to add value. Whereas other champions are more specialized. And I think that's what we've got going on here. We've got Rectordrath, who is a very versatile champion, as you stated, with that revive, with the heals, with a decreased attack on her A1 even, And then you've got Hatu, who's he's good in wave content as a stun champion, but much less useful against bosses. And so maybe he doesn't shine in as many areas as Rectordrath does. But then again, you just picked Mordecai over Detha, so I'm still a little bit shook on that one. But I think I agree with your call here. I think this is a pretty clean cut case. All right, let's move on to game number 20, which is Stag Knite versus Sylar. I was eyeing this one up. I think this is kind of an interesting matchup. Sylar's a little bit of a dark horse here. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the rankings don't do this matchup justice. I think this is one of the closer matchups in the entire bracket for this round anyway. Sylar is a champ that still kind of gets slept on, I think. I think people don't, which may be why she's got the seeding that she does. The A1 AoE, everything she does is AoE. But then you've got Stag Knite, who, for a lot of people that don't have Madame Saras, he's their, defense down, attack down guy. He's got good cooldowns. He's solid. He's simple. Probably the more impactful champ. Earlier in an account, especially, and he's got a cosmetic now, so there's some points for him.
That is something to consider. Yeah.
Oh, this is a tricky one.
We actually have two champions who both have a slow in their kit, and that's not that common, right? We have an A1 slow from Stag Knite, which has a decent chance of land because I think it's 50% on each hit or something along those lines. And then we have Sylar, who not only has an AoE slow, but decreased turn meter of 40%. So she's probably more control, but they're both really good debuffers. They both require accuracy. They both require speed. So similar champions in some ways, although I would definitely say that Stag Knite is the more tanky champion. And like you said, the simpler kit.
Yeah, I think I might have to give it to Stag Knite. I think potential impact is higher, and I think ease of use is probably higher. I think it's probably a lot easier to get Stag Knite rolling effectively than it is to get Sylar rolling effectively. She's also a Void Epic. She's going to be harder to get. I think Stag, you get him, and you just immediately can go. Speed sets, accuracy sets, perception sets if you got him. It's very, very easy. He's not super stat hungry. Make him kind of tanky, fast, and accurate. He's good to go. I think I'm going to take Stag Knite over this one.
Surprisingly difficult choice for a 3 versus 14 matchup there.
It really was, yeah.
Yeah,
it really was.
Yeah. I think that the public will probably agree with you. Stag Knight's one of the more popular epics in the game, I think, and so that alone probably is in his favor. Even though it might seem close on paper, I think public opinion is going to be heavily in. Let's move on to the next one. We've got the 4 versus 13 matchup. Madame Saras versus Hatatsu. Now, I think on the surface of this, it looks a little bit like a runaway, but once you start to dig into it, you realize there aren't going to be a lot of epic tanks in the game, and Hatatsu is actually one of the better epic tanks. So the value here might not come down to the individual champ, but the role that it plays in your roster. What are your thoughts on this matchup?
Yeah, look, he's cool. He's definitely cool. Definitely usable. Some interesting things to be done with him, but he's unfortunately up against Saras, who to this day, I think, is probably one of the GOATs as far as epics in Raid Shadow Legends go. It's really going to be hard for anybody in this bracket to outdo Madame Saras, in my opinion. I think if I was going to call it early, I would call it Madame Saras. Her A3 alone is absurd. It is. I remember when they added her to the game, it was one of the strongest skills I'd ever seen in any of these games. It's such a ridiculous skill to not have a chance to proc either, to just be relying on accuracy. Insane. The rest of her skills are also very good. She's got a solid passive. I think as cool as Hatatsu is, I can't imagine a set of circumstances where I take Saras over, or where I take Hatatsu over Saras. I can't imagine it. There's not a champ I could imagine having in my account even that would make me change my decision. Saras kind of stands alone. I think it's pretty clear cut. I hate it for Hatatsu, but I got to go Saras on this one.
I'll say this for Hatatsu. I think he's been undervalued. I think he's undervalued in the community, and this is a low seed for him. And maybe that was to his detriment to come up against Madame Saras in the first round when he should have maybe had a little bit of a better, easier matchup first time out. But I think I'd probably agree with you. I think most people will agree with you. The one thing I will say is that Madame Saras had a little bit of a dip in her value when Polymorph was introduced to the game.
True.
And so free-to-play players don't worry about Polymorph that much, so I don't expect that to be a huge factor. But if we have any endgame players who are watching this, they may not value Madame Saras as highly because of the polymorph issue in Arena. So now let's take a look at the next matchup, which is number 5 Taragi the Frog up against the 12 seed Sanguinia. Now, I will say, as of 2 weeks ago, I would have not even known who Sanguinia was. I've never built this champion, but I recently pulled her on my HH Challenge account, and I've got to say, she has a very interesting kit. She does have a full team cleanse, plus a block debuff buff for 1 turn, and a triple hit on her A1, useful in a lot of places. But Taragi is perhaps the best ally protection champion in the epic rarity, and that's hard to compete with.
Yes, I am a big fan of Sanguinia. I think she's an epic that's been slept on since she got put in the game. I did a guide on her a long time ago where I really tried to push her value because I think she's a fantastic epic. And at first glance, my initial reaction was that she was going to win this round, but there's a bias in there somewhere, so I have to slow it down and give it some better thought. Because Taragi, who I have no sentimental attachment to whatsoever, he is very good. He's a really cool champ.
I believe Taragi the Frog is now available through a new player code. Is that correct? You know if that's true?
I don't know, but
I believe he is.
Interesting.
And so that would mean that he is available to every player potentially right at the start of the game. So that could tilt things in his favor a little bit from a free-to-play perspective.
Yeah, I think he probably also gives you a path to success in Clan Boss, which what's wild is we're still in a place in this game where you still kind of need a certain group of champions to have that. I'm about to have Vizix on my newer free-to-play account, and I'm still hitting Nightmare. Like, I just don't have anything that can hit Ultra Nightmare yet. So having someone that puts you on a path to Ultra Nightmare is pretty valuable. And I don't think it's as specific as what Detha needs. Detha needs very specific champs around her. I think Taragi leaves it a little bit more broad. I hate it. I think I hate it for Sanguinia because I really like her, and I think she is very undervalued. But I'm probably going to have to give this round to Taragi. I think he's just got probably the more widespread value because on top of giving you that pathway into Clan Boss, I think he's one of those champs that you can kind of take everywhere. He's offering pretty good support everywhere he goes, I would say. So I think Taragi's got to take this round, unfortunately. It breaks my heart a little bit, but
the 5 versus 12 matchups can be notorious for upsets. You know, this is one of the areas where you're starting to get where the seeds are not super close, so it feels like they're far enough apart. But then when you really start looking at them, there's not a lot that separates these competitors. It's definitely 2 good champions in a place in the bracket where either one could take it, and it really depends how the public sees it and which way they vote. So I know that you would like to pick Sanguinia, but I think you're right that we're probably leaning towards Taragi, if only for the fact that I think he's the more well-known champion, and sometimes this comes down to a popularity contest. So perhaps the number 5 makes it through and doesn't have to suffer the upset this time around. Going down to the 21st game here, this is going to be the 6th seed Akemptum, who is a Void Epic, who's got a poison spread mechanic. Hits a lot of multi-hits, is interesting, relatively new to the game, was introduced only about 7 or 8 months ago, I believe. And then Claude Beastfeeder, who surprisingly enough, according to public opinion, is the 3rd highest rated epic in the entire game. We could not possibly have made this video series with Claude as a number 1 seed in this bracket. I don't think anybody would have watched. So we made a small adjustment and dropped Claude closer to where I believe he belongs here, down at the number 11 seed. Honestly, in my opinion, I still think he's a bit high. What do you think about Claude Beastfeeder?
yeah, I don't see what the big deal is. However, I have him on my free-to-play account, and I remember for a while getting comments pretty regularly about you need to build Claude. He's really good. And I'm looking at his kit here again, and I still don't get it. I see that he's good enough support, like he's fine. You could certainly build a team around him. It's not that he's bad by any stretch, but I don't understand the hype, I guess. He's a shield. He's got a shield. He's got a decreased crit rate on the A1 and a speed and accuracy buff. on all allies on his third. So like, he's fine. I just don't get it. A Kemptum, on the other hand, is pretty strong, pretty ridiculous. We've got an all-battle speed lead, like you said, several multi-hits, some important debuffs, Hex and Poison Spread, and interesting stuff going on. The question I guess we have to answer is, who has the bigger impact account-wide? I think this is a more interesting matchup than perhaps it looks like on the surface.
I think the interesting thing about a Kemptum is that he can be a clan boss damage dealer with the poisons, but he can also be a good Hydra champion with the Hex. You don't have access to a lot of AoE Hex champions. Even at legendary level, it's hard to get those into your roster. So this is a Void Epic, a little bit harder to get than a normal Epic. But the upside of that is no weak hits. So you don't have to worry about losing your debuffs because of weak hits. So it feels like if you are looking towards the clan boss fights, that he would be perhaps the better choice. But maybe outside of that, how good is a Kemptum? Have you built in a Kemptum? How good is he at wave clear? How good is he at dungeons? Because he seems like he might be a pretty good all-around damage dealer, depending on how squishy he is, and if you can build him for all of those different requirements.
Yeah, he's got pretty good base HP. I think he's probably relatively reasonable to keep alive. And he does seem like he could be good in a lot of places. All the multi-hits, you could, of course, take him into Fire Knight. I think a Kemptum's probably got more impactful widespread utility. I reckon you could probably put Claude in a lot of teams across the game, but I reckon Claude would also probably be pretty disposable in a lot of those teams. I think a lot of other supports could stand in for him, whereas a Kemptum is a bit more specific. You're going to have a harder time filling his roles if you pull him out of a team. And he's got a speed lead, so if you're struggling for speed leads, he's going to help you out there. I think it's got to be him.
I think that's a very good point, and something that the viewers should consider when they're filling out their prediction brackets, which is how easily replaced is a particular champion. So we were talking about Detha needing other champions to activate her full potential, but simultaneously there are very few block damage champions in the game. So her upside is very high, but her difficulty level is also high. Here with a Kemptum and Claude, we have a similar situation, perhaps not as extreme a case, where a Kemptum might be a little bit tougher to activate, a little bit tougher to acquire, but Claude is more easily replaced, and therefore maybe not as valuable in the long run. All right, so that is interesting. I'm wondering if the public is just going to disagree with us. He is the third highest reviewed champion in the game. Yeah. Are we just going to get slammed today in the comments? Maybe Claude goes all the way through and is fighting Madame Saras for the championship of this particular region. Who knows?
You almost wonder if, like, was there a meme where everybody was just giving Claude high ratings at some point? Because I really don't get it. I don't know why he's got such high ratings.
It's hard to say, but it just goes to show the in-game ratings can be confusing. So, right, so we are moving on from game 21 to game 22 here. We are matching up Gimbo at the 7 seed to Ayla in the 10 seed. Now, Gimbo is one of the top epic arena nukers in the entire game. He has an ignore unkillable passive, which can be very powerful against certain compositions. And then we have Ayla, who's a relatively new epic in the Sylvan Watchers factions. I've got to admit, I've had Gimbo for a really long time on multiple accounts. He's one of my favorite champions, and I've never played Ayla, so I don't even know how this matchup would work. Have you had any experience with the Sylvan Watcher champion?
Yes, I actually have her maxed out on my free-to-play account. And she's fine. She's a good, solid support anywhere that I've stuck her. She's done her job. She's done it effectively. However, as cool as she is, I think I would probably start a riot if I gave her this round over Gimbo. I think he's just far too popular and far too strong. I think they're very different champs, but I think he's way stronger at his job than she is at hers. The ignoring unkillable thing is ridiculous. That's so important in today's raid. You know what I mean? So, not to mention he's got other cool stuff going on. buffs himself, sets himself up to do a lot of damage. I have had my team wiped by him many, many times. And again, Ayla's cool. I like her. I don't regret building her. I use her. I have bigger plans for her, but I think Gimbo has to probably take this one. If for no other reason than popularity, but I think he is stronger than she is too.
I think you bring up a good point. Being good at your job is one of the things that we need to consider here. Gimbo is absolutely a specialist. I don't think many people would, for instance, put him in Hydra Clan Boss, even though he has an AoE. He just doesn't bring a lot to that particular fight. But in the arena, it's really hard to beat him as an epic. I'm not sure there's another epic that really matches what he can do in arena. And as a result, he can be your gold 5 solution. The day you get him, you can just start clicking away and getting that great haul progress going. And as a result, he was actually not on the list because he is such a specialist, but he is so strong at his job that we made him one of the 8 specialist picks for the top 64. And do you think he landed in the right spot? Do you think around the 7 seed is where he should be? Because if you look at it, there aren't a ton of damage dealers in this region, and it looks like it's basically Genbo, Akemtum, and Fane.
I don't know. I think roughly, yeah. If it's him versus Akemtum at any point, ooh, that's going to be interesting. Actually, I don't know. Yeah, I think that's probably a pretty reasonable spot for him to land, all things considered.
The 8 seed against the 9 seed here. This is Fane versus Ugo. We just mentioned Fane. Now, Fane is another specialist. Again, a very good champion at the job she does, which is primarily killing clan boss. Ugo, on the other hand, is a little bit more versatile, although most widely regarded as a Hydra champion and also frequently used in arena. How do you see this matchup going?
This is one where I would say I'm probably a little surprised to see them this close. I like Fane. I've built Fane on, I think, every account I've ever really played. I think I tend to pull her early in the life of all of my accounts, and I usually build her in Sticker and Clan Boss even before I have Unkillable. She's also really helpful in Faction Wars, getting through the final boss. She's cool, but you will outgrow her, and she just doesn't really belong in the conversation with Ugo. I think Ugo pretty far and away takes this round. I think Ugo at 9 is even strange, all things considered. I think Ugo pretty handily wins this round. She's just too impactful where she's impactful. Again, Fane is fairly interchangeable. There's a lot of different ways to get done what Fane can do for you. Ugo's a little bit more specific. Ugo's got some pretty interesting things going on. Solid support, revive, block buffs, lots of really important stuff that, again, for Hydra and Arena. And I think even when you're progressing, I think she's probably really good in your progressing dungeon teams and stuff. So I think I have to give this to Ugo.
This may be a case of simply the general public rating a champion before they get to a position in their account where that champion is actually the most valuable. You know, because she's so valuable in Hydra, a lot of players don't get into Hydra for a long time, whereas everybody tries to get into Clan Boss right away because they know of the value of getting that Nightmare and Ultra Nightmare chest and getting, you know, additional drops in terms of shards and tomes and stuff like that. So Fane is a one-stop shop for your debuffs, for your Clan Boss. And so I think her value is easily perceived by a newer player or an early game player. Whereas Ugo, like you said, is perhaps doing a job that is more rare. She has a skill set that is more rare, and she does it very well. But it is more of a mid-game skill set. That's when you start to pick it up. And maybe that's why we're seeing her down here at 9. I agree with you that I think she is seated low, but perhaps that's the reason why.
It's interesting that a lot of these games let you review a champ the minute you 6-star them. Like the minute you unlock their full potential and really get to start using them is the minute you get to review them. It's like, well, you don't even know. So I think it's not uncommon for people to just go in and click what they think the consensus is. You know what I mean?
I also find it interesting that you can review a champion for areas of the game where you've never run them and maybe never would. Yeah. So if, you know, if you've never run a champion through Iron Twins, why are you giving them a 5-star Iron Twins rating or a 3-star Iron Twins rating? It shouldn't be a rating that you can give at that point. But
yeah.
that is one of the parts that makes this bracket kind of interesting, because if the content creators were just to pick their top 64 champions, I think it would look very different than this. And maybe it's interesting because the free-to-play perspective might be a little bit more represented by that popular vote that happens in game. Again, just a reminder, we don't get things like faction crypts. We don't have a score for like the campaign score, and all of that stuff was removed. The potion keeps and so on and so forth. But the big miss, I think, in the ratings is not having ratings for the Doom Tower bosses. That is also another huge area of importance. And Ugo can be valuable in several Doom Tower fights as well. And I think even in several very difficult floors as you progress up into higher Doom Tower. And so a lot of her value isn't really rated in the rating system.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is interesting. We've got some upset picks from our expert analyst here, JGigs, who's doing a great job. Now let's look at the bracket as a whole and just try to project what's going to happen moving forward. So you were debating Detha versus Mordecai. You might be thinking about the upset there. But Rectordrath walking her way through. You did say that Madame Saras is a champion you're not sure you could take anybody else against. So let's start with the upsets. What upsets do you foresee happening in the first round, and what do you project moving forward? Who's going to maybe make it interesting in rounds 2 or 3?
As far as upsets go, now that I'm looking at the rankings, it kind of worked. I guess it's going to have to be Mordecai over Detha. I think every other bracket we took the higher seed, which I don't think.
For Ugo's technically the lower seed.
Oh, true, yeah. So yeah, I guess the big upset I'm after here is Mordecai over Detha. I think she just needs too much specific stuff around her to be an impact straight out of the pool, and Mordecai's ready to go as soon as you get him. So I think
I love that you're just going out on that limb right away. You're just like, we're doing a 1/16 upset first bracket. Detha, hugely popular champion, but you're on the Mordecai bandwagon, and I love it. But this begs the question. You were talking just a moment ago about how strong Ugo is, and that would set up a matchup between Ugo and Mordecai. Can you see any way that he keeps that streak going and makes it through to the Sacred 16?
I don't think it's unthinkable. I think perhaps it's unlikely, but I don't think it's unthinkable. It's going to be an interesting matchup to visit should we get there.
All right. And then does everything else play out as planned? Do we end up with a Madame Saras versus Ugo or Mordecai in the Sacred 16, and then Madame Saras is going through to the regional finals? Is that what you see?
Yeah, I don't see anybody in this bracket that I think is going to take it from Saras. I see Saras winning this bracket.
Are we seeing Stag Knite and Rectordrath, the 2 and 3 seed, matching up in the Sacred 16, and one of them, the winner of that matchup, deciding who's going to fight out the championship here with Madame Saras?
Yeah, that seems pretty reasonable. And I'm thinking, ooh, man, Rectordrath and Stag, that's an interesting conversation to have. I don't know. My initial thought was Rectordrath, and then the more I thought about it, I was like, I don't know, man. Stag can do some pretty important stuff.
And he's a very popular champion.
Yeah. What's disappointing for both of them is it doesn't matter, because they're just going to get to the next bracket, and Saras is going to kick them out. So,
well, the Epic 8 is going to be epic. I'm excited for that matchup. If you had to pick a sleeper in this group, who do you think might just upset the apple cart?
The biggest sleeper? I don't know. I guess it has to be Mordecai against everyone else. Just because I think he's the 16, so he was the lowest in the bracket. And he got immediately paired up against the 1, and I think I take him over the 1. So I think that's a pretty good underdog story. Even if he's not able to take it to the end, I think that's pretty impactful.
Personally, I'm looking at Gimbo because I think he's the only true S tier arena champion here, and some people just really like arena champion. Now, actually, I'm sorry, that's not fair. Damage dealer, because Madame Saras is absolutely an S tier arena champion. So we could end up, they're on the opposite sides of the bracket, we could end up with arena champ versus arena champ, arena support versus arena nuker to see who goes to the final four. We'll have to wait and see what happens. So that is it for the Southwest region, the Spider's Den. So go ahead and take that information and start filling out your brackets now. You can continue to change your brackets until the voting starts, and those dates will be posted on the bracket website. All right, Jay, you got any final thoughts here before we send this one off?
Man, this is a lot of fun. I think it's a really cool idea. I'm excited to see it continue to develop. I'm invested. I want to see who makes it to the next round, and it's a great idea, man. Fun. I appreciate you having me on to participate.
Well, thanks for coming. This is JGigs, everybody. If you don't know him, we will have a link to his YouTube channel in the description of this video. You should go check it out. Throw him a sub. I promise you will not be disappointed. Great raid content and a very funny man. He's got a couple of other channels as well you're going to want to check out. Jay, thanks for being here, man. I had a blast as always. And that is it for us today. We will see you in another video soon.